In this video, we overview the basics and the forms of the Koine Greek definite article. So as to the grammatical basics of the definite article, Greek has a definite article, meaning the in English. So English also has a definite article. And English also has an indefinite article, which Greek does not have. So Greek only has a definite article, no indefinite article. So normally indefiniteness, or the translation a or an in Greek, is going to be indicated by the absence of the Greek article. There are also some peculiarities to the Greek definite article. Greek uses the definite article a little bit differently than we do in English, and we'll talk more about this in the second semester Greek class, but there's a couple to be aware of sort of from the outset. One is that you will often see the Greek article occurring with names. So here, Bale ha Jesus. Ha Jesus, we know that Jesus is the subject of the sentence because of this article. This is the nominative masculine singular article. So it tells us that Jesus is in the nominative masculine singular and is the subject of the verb bale. So Jesus throws. This is because Jesus or Jesus is what is called an indeclinable noun. A lot of names in Greek don't change their form. They don't decline or inflect their ending based on what they're doing in a sentence. So the definite article gives us that information. So the same words, though in different forms, bale ton Jesus means he, she, or it throws Jesus. In this case, Jesus is the object of the verb bale, and we know this because ton is the accusative masculine singular. So even though Jesus look exactly the same in these two sentences, this Jesus is the thrower, the subject, and this Jesus is the throwee, the object, on the basis of the definite article, which gives us that grammatical information. So this is one of the reasons that we'll often see the definite article occurring with names. And so, of course, here you wouldn't translate this the Jesus throws or it throws the Jesus, but we leave out in English the definite article even though it's there in Greek. So all this is also to say that sometimes the definite article will appear in places where you don't expect it, and other times, or at least where you don't expect it in English, and other times it will be absent where you would expect it in English. There are cases where we will want to put in a Greek article in English, an English article where it is absent from Greek. And that's okay to do in translation. If you think that the English translation sort of calls for the definite article, you should add it in because Greek uses the article differently than English does. And lastly, the article is always going to match the noun that it goes with in case, gender, and number. And so this is one of the reasons so that knowing and being familiar with recognizing those forms from the different paradigms is important. And this is why the definite article paradigm is going to be sort of most importance for this week. It's going to be the one thing that you memorize for this week. It's sort of where you're putting all of your memorization energy, and it's the one paradigm from which I will ask you to reproduce things on the quiz for this week. And so speaking of that paradigm, we have it here. You'll notice that there are sort of 8 different forms for each, the masculine, the feminine, and the neuter. So 24 items to memorize in total, which might seem a little bit daunting, but hopefully a couple observations about this paradigm might help to break that daunting task down just a little bit. So one is to think of tau, and also to think of the rough breathing mark as the stem of the definite article. So you notice in all of these, so everywhere except for the nominative masculine, feminine, singular, and the nominative masculine and feminine plural, we have a tau, and it's sort of functioning as the stem to which the different endings are added. And in the cases up here, we have a rough breathing mark, ha, hey, and down here, hoi and hi, wherein you can think of the rough breathing mark as the stem to which the letters or endings are added. So you'll also notice the masculine and the neuter follow the second declension. We'll sort of line up some of our masculine and neuter second declension mnemonic devices with the paradigm here in just a second. But so these are following the endings of the second declension. And the feminine is following the endings of the first declension. And as is always the case, the neuter nominative and accusative are always identical to one another. So the nominative and the accusative look exactly the same in the singular and in the plural, and they differ from what you see in the masculine over here. So besides the nominative and the accusative in both the singular and the plural, these are identical to each other. That is to say, to and toe over here, and then tone and toice over here. So if you can remember this sort of handy rule that in the neuter, the nominative and the accusative are always identical to one another in both the singular and the plural, and they differ from the masculine, that helps you sort of memorize these ones here in the middle of the paradigm. And so I told you I was going to sort of put up some of our mnemonics for the endings here. So you'll notice we have our friend Suine Ionesus as our second declension mnemonic for the different endings, with a couple of exceptions here. I'm going to write in our Yoda subscripts in our respective colors. So we have missing here the beginning of their name. So really it's kind of Wayne and the endings. We don't have the vocative epsilon here. So it's just kind of Wen Ionesus. But nonetheless, the sort of core of his name might help you remember these endings here outside of the nominative and the vocative being absent here. And then we have Asina Ionesas here with the nominative once again being absent. We don't have an alpha here, but we have an eta instead. And then if we can sort of get this information out here and know the masculine, then if you can remember that the neuter, nominative, and accusative are the same as each other and different from over here, these ones are going to be the same yet again, so that your mnemonic can sort of help you out over here as well. And this is what I say by way of suggestion. First, that you should memorize from top to bottom, starting at the nominative, masculine, singular, and working all the way down through the plural. So ha, tu, to, ton, hoi, ton, tois, tus. Memorize these, and then work your way from there. So I start, when I memorize the nominative, or the definite article, I start with the nominative and memorize the masculine. And if I can get this down, if I can get it written down like on my whiteboard or on a piece of paper, then it's a lot easier for me to fill in the rest. Then so I write this down, and then I move over to the neuter. And because I know that rule that these two are always going to be the same as these two, I can fill those in, and then all I have to remember is the different form here and the different form here. And then move over to the feminine, and a lot of times sort of having these already written sort of gives me the visual help to be able to fill in the feminine definite article endings, or the definite article paradigm, with respect to Xena over here. So what I want you to do is we're going to practice a little bit filling these in. So I know you haven't had a lot of time with these paradigms yet, but as I've said before, and as I will say again, taking guesses at these things and correcting yourself is going to go a long way for your memorization and for your learning. So remember this rule here. I'm going to highlight it now because in just a second, I'm going to remove the neuter definite articles here and ask you to fill those in on your whiteboard. I will leave these up, take these out, and ask you just to write in the neuters, having these as a visualization. So if you remember this little rule, that the neuter, nominative, and accusative are always identical to one another. This is true both in the singular and in the plural, and they differ from the masculine. This will help you fill in the blanks here. So see if you can go ahead and fill in the blanks for the neuter on your whiteboard. And it should look like this. So remember, these ones are our differences. So you should have been able to sort of fill these ones in with respect to these. And then if you could remember the ta and the ta, you can fill those in that way. So what we're going to do next is take out our neuters and take out our masculines and ask you to fill those in. So sort of the way that I would suggest going about doing this is filling in the masculine first and then filling the neuter in from there. So remembering that the masculine follows the second declension, Suine Ionissus. Let's see if you can fill in the masculine definite article paradigm and then the neuter definite article paradigm on your whiteboard. So you might do this this way if you're to go about sort of making a chart for this, that you do it like this on your whiteboard, giving enough space for each one of these blocks here. So here are our blanks. Go ahead and pause now and see if you can fill in. So it should look something like this. And we're going to do one more time, filling in the feminine, recognizing that the feminine, feminine follows the first declension with our friend Asina Ionissus. So go ahead and see if this mnemonic down here can help you fill in here as you pause. So it looks like this. Hey, taste, tay, tain. High tone, tice, toss. And the last thing we're going to do is see if you can fill in the entire paradigm here. This is the hardest task, and this is the one that you should sort of be working to be able to do before you go and take that grammar quiz for the week. So go ahead and pause and do your best seeing what you can fill in here of the definite article paradigm. Here it is one more time in its entirety. All right, so the next thing we're going to do here is just do a couple practice sample sentences for the first time with the definite article in them. So go ahead and pause and see if you can give us a translation here of this sentence. I'll read it for us. Luo ton dulon ente ecclesia. So this should look a bit familiar to you. So here are some helps to help you check yourself or to provide some information to fill out your translation a little bit more. So you remember we had this translation in the last lecture, though without the definite articles here. So here we have I loosen. The subject is embedded in the verb and a non-explicit subject. The subject is I in this case. The object in the accusative is ton dulon. So our on ending here and with the definite article tells us that we have the accusative case. And then we have a prepositional phrase in, a preposition that takes the dative case after it. So in the church. I release the slave in the church. And let's do another one here, another one that should look familiar to you. Go ahead and, well, I'll read first and then I'll ask you to pause. Gropse ha apostolos tein parabalein te neania. So go ahead and pause and see if you can get a translation here. And some helps once again for your self-correction and for more information to fill in. And moving somewhat quickly through this one, since we have already had one very, very similar, just with definite articles in here now. We have gropse. Remember this ps sound there is indicates the future, that we have a P plus a sigma that makes the psi, indicating the future, and it's third person singular. He, she, or it will write. The he, she, or it is the apostle in the nominative case. So the apostle will write the parable. This case, our accusative is tain parabolain, an accusative feminine singular, to a young man in the dative case as the indirect object. And one final sentence that is less familiar that we did not do in that last video. I'll go ahead and read it. Graphe tous lagus graphes ha prophetes tu theou. Go ahead and pause and get a translation here. Here we have some helps for correction and filling in. This one is a touch trickier insofar as our subject is not as close to the verb as it has been in some of our other sentences. So our verb is the first word in the sentence. Graphe, in this case, a present tense, not graps a, graph a. So he, she, or it writes. And our subject in the nominative case is over here towards the end of the sentence. Ha prophetes. And in this case, our definite article doesn't necessarily look like the ending, or the definite article doesn't share the same ending as the noun itself. Prophetes, though, is a nominative masculine singular noun, even though this sort of looks like a genitive feminine singular ending. Prophetes is a first declension masculine noun. So it's always best to try and find your grammatical information about the case first from the definite article. So this telling us we have the nominative subject, the prophet writes, and I should also say of God is modifying the prophet. So the prophet of God writes tous lagus graphes. So tous lagus is the object with the genitive graphes. This is a feminine genitive singular noun. So even though these endings look the same, this one is nominative, this one is genitive because this is feminine and this is masculine. So a genitive modifying the words of scripture or of a writing. So the prophet of God writes the words of scripture. All right, that's all we have for the definite article. Up next is adjectives.